Good morning. This is a short intro to the terribly long and confusing intro that comes next. I also wanted to share with you, hope you can see this. I don't know if it's uh, in focus. This is the leaf that I refer to at the end of the dreadfully long intro. See you in the next video. I was thinking about dominance, starting with color dominance and thinking, okay, for this week's videos, I'll focus on color dominance and remind myself that that was the idea of the weekly videos on color in the course Color Play in Art. And and indeed it sort of is. Uh, but that led me to believe that led me to wonder, how am I going to present that when my daily color mapping activity has been one of mapping my inner landscape and the experiences of the day before or the day, depending on what time of day I'm doing it, uh, woven into the outer landscape, the landscape of the yard or wherever I am, the weather. And does it relate at all, or is it the mood of the landscape that I'm looking at that brings to mind the thoughts I'm thinking, reflecting, bringing up memories that then evoke emotions, and those are the ones that I'm looking to find the colors of, uh, you know, all it reminds me a little bit of when my kids were little and we would go out foraging for vines, for bittersweet, trying to avoid the poison ivy, and gathering grapevines, wild grapevines, and bringing all of our foraged material back, stripping off the leaves, and creating baskets, weaving baskets. Not really knowing when we set out what we were going to find in the forest, and coming back and having all these materials around us, um, and not knowing what kind of baskets we were going to make. But we would start, and then we would start to weave the baskets, and we'd end up with whatever we ended up with of those materials. So that analogy makes a great deal of sense to me. I have no idea if it makes sense to anybody else. Uh, but that's okay. That's okay. Make whatever sense out of it you want to. The reason I think of that is that last night I was looking for a certain sketchbook. Again, thinking, okay, I'm going to be filming some specific videos today. I was thinking this last night. And I wanted to find that sketchbook because I knew that I'd been thinking about dominance of shape, dominance of color, dominance of saturation, all kinds of dominance things when I was working in this sketchbook that had little tiny squares or rectangles in it, little thumbnail sketches of things. And in looking through the sketchbooks, which I will present in this week's videos, I I realized that I felt like I was looking at a different lifetime. And a lot of them were done in 2023, which was laying the groundwork for what I'm doing now. And Then there was a gap, a shift, and a lack of remembering what I did through 2024. And that I attribute to the loss of all my artwork from the flood in January of 2024, which I'm still processing. But I feel as if this last week has been a leap forward in being able to recognize that as a real turning point, but not one that I'm chained to anymore, which is huge, which is really, really huge. And looking back, almost feeling like that was a necessary event to make room for the new growth now. And I really mean that. Um, I had forgotten that there were a good possibly 2 years of possibly longer prior to 2023, which brings us back to 2020, COVID, 2021, where I had the experience in Parc André Citron, 2021, 22, where I was working through that experience, trying to figure out what had been awakened during that time, but the world was still recovering from the world shutdown from COVID. And then 2023, which was incredibly productive in a way I'd forgotten, but I discovered last night looking through the sketchbooks. Then 2024 came and knocked me for a loop for a period of, I think it was about 2, 3 weeks. I really questioned whether I would pick up a paintbrush again, or a fountain pen, or a pencil, or anything. But clearly I got past that. Um, yeah, even that couldn't drive the drive out of me. And I'm now discovering, uncovering parts of that energy and drive, um, and really doing my best to nurture it and reveal it. So these things are kind of hard to describe, to put words to, because they're really such deep feelings, and deep feelings. I think maybe the language of art or music works a little better to express that, but I have to try to do it with words. So I'm trying. Okay, let's see. Let me get back on track. Another thing I wanted to say is how important an art community is. And and in starting the artist journey community, I wanted to develop that. And I and I um and I'm pleased. It's very small, but uh but it's been valuable to me. Um okay, but I didn't really want to talk about the artist journey. What I wanted to talk about were the artists who influenced me the most through this period of perhaps 2018 until now, that thanks to sketchbooks and dating the sketches in the sketchbooks, because I have so many sketchbooks going and they jump from, decades ago to this decade, so it's important. And sometimes I'm shocked when I see the date of the sketch or the color map. So um, I can track where I am now back through the last three mentors, um, who are Liz Huff, Tansy Hargan, and Sally Hurst. And I can track those three artists back to my dear friend, Jill Richards, because Jill Richards is the one who introduced me to the work and the online courses of Tansy, Sally, and Liz. And I can track knowing Jill back to having first come to France to create art with Susan Abbott. And Susan Abbott in Provence inspired me to join her again in Paris. And in Paris, because of the world situation where there was a horrible terrorist attack in Paris the year prior to my going to Paris for the first time. And because of that, I had a very hard time booking an Airbnb. And because of that, I ended up in Belleville, where my now landlady, Anne, agreed to rent me a flat. And I continued to go to Paris for a month every year up until just recently, the last couple of years. Um, and ended up caring for her garden and her cat and being in her space, which was incredibly nurturing for an artist. It was filled with art, sculpture. Her mother was a sculptor and her father was an architect. Um, Anne was an architect and then shifted to music, and she teaches voice. And um, so this space is just full of creative, wonderful energy. And it was because I was in Paris and Jill had been following me on my blog, though I didn't know that. And the reason she was following me on my blog was because she had been following a blog of an artist from Australia. And I don't remember who that artist is, but that artist had posted a blog about the 10 blogs that she followed, and mine happened to be one of them. So Jill was following me because of the artist in Australia. And Jill saw that I traveled a lot, and she had an artist community in Wales. And she contacted me and said, would you consider, have you taught in the UK? And if not, would you consider coming and teaching in the UK? So I did. I said, of course. And I've been going back to Wales ever since and teaching there and traveling with Jill and learning about all these other amazing artists that I'd never heard of before, becoming acquainted with the history of the art community in St. Ives. I just can go on, and it's because of Jill that I finally made it to Greece. And I did the workshop with Liz Huff in Tuscany last year, and I'm going back again this year. And in Tuscany, I know this is a crazy story, but it's the intertwining, it's the weaving. That's the whole point. In Tuscany, we were in the Verrocchio Art Center, which had been started by a sculptor who had passed when I was there before I was there last year, but his studio was completely intact. And I had to walk through his studio to go to the Roman bath that he had created and swim with it. At the end, it was a sculpt a sculpture of the Blue Lady. I call her the Blue Lady. She's copper, so she's turned blue. Um and I I was connecting again with my very first mentor, who was Waylon Gregory, a sculptor, and really the only teacher I had um, until I started studying with Adolf Conrad. So it was this big circle bringing me back to the first person, Waylon Gregory, who acknowledged a spark in me that I didn't see, but he did. And in his own um, nudgy way, I was very young. He coaxed me into keeping that little spark alive. Um, yeah, that the lesson I learned from him was about form. Um, I'd been working on a head. I'd worked so hard on the head and the eye, and I thought I'd done a nice job on the eye. But I knew that something wasn't right. It didn't speak back to me. And he asked permission first. He said, okay, the only way that I can explain what's wrong with your head is to do something drastic to it. May I have permission to do that? And and I wanted to learn, I wanted to learn. I thought, sure, I'm sure that, it'll be fine. So that eye that I had worked so hard on took his thumb and he just gouged it out. And I gasped. I was like, oh my God, what did you do? But then I saw what he did. I'd created the eye, but I put it sort of on the surface of the face. There had been no eye socket. And what he showed me was the form, was the three-dimensional form that I perceived everything in, because I think really I was always a sculptor. And still I translate from the three dimensions into the two dimensions. But he's the one who made me aware of that because I didn't know how to bring that into the real world. And what he showed me, as soon as he did that, as horrified as I was, it spoke back to me. I said, yes, that's it. And when I recovered from the shock, I thought, uh, even if I never put an eye in it, that's what I was going for. So that was my very first big lesson. So as usual, I've just digressed enormously. But if you followed this far, I think it's still valuable because what I'm talking about is how one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And there were still lessons that I had to remember there are still lessons that I learned from Waylon Gregory that I started to connect with and remember again when I was in Tuscany last year in that sculptor's studio. And and it was quite a roundabout way to get there. But that's what community is about. And it's not just your artist friends, but your artist friends are really, really important to share and discuss and have conversation with and trust and encourage and have fun with and spend the time. The thing about live classes, live workshops, I mean, online workshops, I'm so grateful for, and I've learned so much. But the live workshops is where you learn things and then you go out to dinner later, or you go out and you have a glass of wine, or you meet for coffee in the morning, or you meet up, you travel into another city, you've met somebody at a workshop, and then you travel to see them. And it's the conversation, or in the middle of the workshop where you glance over, you're working on something yourself, and then you glance over or wander around the room and see someone else's work, and it's like, oh my God, never would have thought about that. And you see so many different ways of working on the very same assignment, and you share that space, and you're there to encourage and get encouragement from each other. And it is so, so valuable. And that's what, oh my goodness, when I think of all the books, all the people, all, I mean, a huge part of my current life would not be part of my life if Jill had not sent me that email and asked if I would teach in Wales. And the community that's developed, there's a walking group that every time I go to Wales, I go on a long hike with this walking group that one of the artists that I know through Jill is part of. And so I was invited years ago to go for walks, hikes with them. And so that's part of my annual visit is to go for a hike with these people. So it's not just the artist community, but it's the communities that the artists connect with and enhance your life, add elements to your life that that are worth expressing through your artwork. And that brings me full circle back to this morning's color mapping, talking about dominance. I know it was a long trip to get here, but this is what I was thinking about with, oh, so how do I show if what I end up color mapping today is an inner landscape? How do I make sense of that? Showing a color map of something that I can't project out for people to see what it is I'm looking at because it's inside of me. And that brings me back to the reason I wanted to be an artist in the first place is because as a, I don't know, maybe even as an infant, one of the first things I wanted to be able to do was to share the magic that I saw inside my head, the the colored ribbons of light dancing around when I would hear music or when I would be in nature. When I was really happy, it was, I thought everyone had these beautiful colored ribbons dancing around in their head. And when I would talk about them, I saw that that was not the case. And I thought if they could only see them, I want to be able to share those with people because they're so beautiful. And so I thought, I guess I have to become a painter. But how do you how do you share that? I wanted to be able to have this little camera inside my head and project it onto the wall. So I've spent my whole life trying to learn the skills to be able to do that. And it's really only in the last couple of years, maybe even the last 2 years, that I've started through color mapping, through automatic drawing, through trauma when I could only connect the dots. Through all of that, I started to see my work be a mirror back to me. And so now, even though maybe nobody sees it, but when I look at some of my color mapping, the pack series work I'm doing, it's as if I'm projecting what's going on inside, not just ribbons of light anymore, but all kinds of things tumbling together. I feel as if I am projecting it out onto canvas, onto paper. And it's there to be seen. It's it's honest and true and it is what's inside of this. It's my inner landscape. And I know a lot of people won't perceive it that way. Maybe they'll see a glimpse of their own inner landscape. It doesn't have to be mine, but I think that the work I'm doing now is is communicating what I've wanted to communicate. And some people will hear the music, see the dance, feel the experience, and some won't, but that's the case all the time anyway. So I am really excited. And how does this relate to dominance? I'm still trying to figure that out. But but it is I'm going to fumble through the videos for this week uh, to to uncover what that might mean. Because really, the idea of the color play in art was to allow people to see my practice through my eyes. And my practice is not a linear practice. It jumps all over the place. And so, you know, mm, I guess I'm asking you to jump along with me and share some of your side leaps, um, or not. But anyway, I think I really need to end this video and start looking through the sketchbooks with you, uh, because I think that the quick glance through them made me set them aside and say, okay, there's something here. Going back to contemplate, going back to look at these, reviewing my work, and I am going to begin yet another practice to help me organize a bit more at the end of the week or someday on a weekly basis. I do plan on looking back and reviewing my week because in looking at these sketchbooks, I would do things and do things and do things and do things and move on and it would lead me to something else and then I would follow that and I forgot where I started and there were a lot of loose ends left behind. So I think going back, I don't have to reinvent my wheel over and over and over again. I can just add the spokes that are missing. So that's what I plan. And what I found for dominance today was after my walk, when I went back to check my blueberry bushes that are buried in weeds, and then to check the secret garden that's also buried in weeds, I came across a leaf that had fallen. And it's July 5th, so it's not autumn yet, but there are some leaves that are kind of turning color. And this one was all speckled. It had fallen and it was yellow and browns and green and darker browns and some kind of orange browns. And the overall thing that struck me lying on the green grass, the grass, it's all pretty much the same shape of blades or weeds and things, but was the pattern. And I thought, oh, the dominant thing there isn't the color, it's the pattern. If I were to map what I'm looking at, the dominant color would be the green grass that this leaf is lying on. But what jumps out to me is this pattern. So if I were to do a painting of the thought, the impression that I just had, it would be inconsistent with my feelings to have a dominant color green that would dominate over this pattern. What would be a truer representation of that flashy moment that caught my attention and got me excited was the pattern of the leaf. So I went in and I did my color map of the pattern of the leaf to solidify that, also to make note of it in my color map journal that that was my thought and experience, which led me down here to make this long, tedious video for you. I guess I was really making it for me. Um, to move forward with saying, okay, I can't at this point in my life separate the skill, separate the elements, separate the tools as much as I'm trying to present in some kind of online class. Um, So that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at dominance in a different way. And of course, color is involved with everything, unless it's one of the graphite drawings I'm doing, which is all grayscale. But that's the way it is. So moving on, I'll go through some of the sketchbooks and I will go through them uh, filming as I go through for the first time. I glanced through, put the pile there, like three or four of them. So who knows how far I'll get, but I will narrate my thoughts as I go through it. Skip through, speed it up, whatever you want to do. I think this week's videos are really for my own records, and I hope that you get something out of them. And I would, really, really like feedback if you do, because I do want to share this journey. It's very exciting, and I feel in the last couple of days that I've come out of a deep sleep, kind of a stupor I've been in since the flood. And it feels really good to be moving on, not negating the experience. And I'm sure there's still a lot of things to learn from it and some traumas to process. But thanks to Carol, one of the artists in the artist journey, I've learned two significant techniques to get a good night's sleep with some good deep sleep and to start processing trauma that I had pushed down. So, get one of the great benefits of a community of people, not just artists. Carol is an artist, she's an amazing artist, but community of people around you that you can trust, that you love, that you can be open to, that you can help. Um, Whether you're in contact all the time or not, there are connections. And it's worth keeping those connections alive and nourishing them as much as we can. So thank you for listening, if you've listened this far, and I'll see you in the next video. One more thought I have. I will include at the very end, I'm going to include a montage of photographs. Some of them may be of paintings, a lot of them will just be photographs that I've taken, during the days, whatever. And the idea is, because I'm going to do this for myself so that I can get to the next stage of thinking about this dominance. I'm going to decide for myself what is dominant in each one of them. Are there multiple dominances? I'm just going to be thinking, looking for what dominance means to me. I mean, briefly, it means kind of the biggest thing or what there is the most of. What is it that dominates the image? Okay. And it could be just a little speck of red, even though that's minuscule. If that's what dominates the image, what if it's all black canvas with a brilliant red dot so that what you see first is the red dot? Would you call that dominant or not? And I don't think there's a right answer to that. I think that one day you may look at it and the black dominates, but another day it could be that the red dominates. And what does that mean? What is that calling attention to? So it's something that will ask a lot of questions. And if you approach it with an open mind and you think first, I think I'll probably leave the images up a little longer than I normally do. It's usually like a 3-second view before the slide shifts. I think I may leave it up to 5 seconds, or maybe even 6 seconds. Again, for myself to say, okay, what first grabbed my attention? And when I look a little longer, is was that just a lead in to what really dominates or not? And again, there is no right answer. I'm searching for what it means to me and how I can apply that meaning to my own work. That's really all that matters. And the way I apply it probably isn't the way that you're going to apply it, but it's a really good question, and it's a really good area to look into because often when I know early on when I would paint landscapes, I would end up doing a painting of a landscape that what grabbed my attention isn't even in the painting. You know, I got sidetracked by the reality, by depicting the reality of it. And what had excited me, what had started me painting that painting in the first place, wasn't there at all. So keep that in mind while you look at this last video for the week's videos in Color Play and Art. Have fun and enjoy your own point of view. I'm Chris Carter. Have a great day.